I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Today, I am joined by Olivia Carvalho. Hi, Olivia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. I think our topic today is one that, maybe we don't hear too much about in terms of, honest conversations that we have about menstrual cycles and how that impacts our mental health. But before we go into our topic, please introduce yourself as we do with all of our first time guests.
For sure. Yeah, my name's Olivia Carvalho. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I am a menstrual educator as well as a fertility coach. So I spend a lot of time talking to people about their cycles and trying to determine what's gone off the tracks, what's gone wrong with their cycle. Maybe they're experiencing really debilitating pain, or they're doing some work before they try to start a family, or they've been trying to start a family for a few years without success. So they're wondering what's going on in their bodies. So it's a pretty full spectrum in terms of the type of education that I do. But my passion is working with people to find answers and help them better understand their own bodies so they can advocate for themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. And because we are outside the therapy room, we always want to check in with folks about who they are outside of their profession. So, who are you outside of what you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't necessarily get asked that a lot. I think of myself in fertility and menstrual world. But outside of that, I'm a lifelong reader and camper, and I recently relocated to Northern Ontario, so I've been really enjoying having more outdoor time and lots of swimming time this summer. I also love to bake and cook, and I'm really passionate about food as a route for nourishment in the body and also as a means of connection. So I love having people over for dinner.
I love that. And it's so nice too, like how cooking and everything can really help us connect with people. And not to mention the impact that food has on our bodies and our mental health and our menstrual cycles when we're going through it. So, like I mentioned, today we are talking about menstrual cycles, how that impacts our mood, our mental health. I mean, I think we hear a lot about it. It's like everywhere of like, if you're on your period, you're going to be moody. Like that's always a thing that's kind of shown up. I'm remembering an episode of Modern Family where all three of the girls are on their cycle at the same time. They all have their period, and Phil is like super bummed about it because there was a big event that they were going to do. And so, like, there is sometimes some negativity towards those of us who have menstrual cycles and how our mood shifts from that. But before we get into that, I know you kind of started this field because you yourself were experiencing quite painful periods. And so what can you tell us about that, kind of how you got into the line of work that you're in?
Yeah, for sure. That's so funny. I was thinking about that episode of Modern Family the other day and how Phil is trying to cover it up from his young son, and that just really plays into the whole um just the fact that we all kind of have hit it for so long, and even the education that we get in school isn't comprehensive enough to help us understand what's going on in our own bodies. So that was definitely my experience. My grade 6 health class did not give me any indicators of why my period would be such a mess, or what I could have done to prevent it, or even kind of help myself earlier on. So my story starts at age 12 when I got my first period, and then by age 14 I started having what I call like episodes or attacks, and would be on the first day of my menstrual bleed. I would get this really visceral pain that would kind of take over, super nauseous. I would have like a headache and diarrhea, and my vision would blur. And this became more frequent. It wasn't every cycle, but it was definitely becoming more frequent the later I got into my teenage years. And by the time I was ready to move away to university, I had full-blown anxiety that went with it. And that was equally as debilitating because the week leading up to my cycle, I would cancel on plans. I would not want to leave the house. I was scared that if I went to a class and I had one of these episodes, I would be passed out on a bathroom floor and no one would be able to find me. So it started to kind of take over my life in a bigger way than I was realizing. And that's when I started to seek external help. And by that point, I had seen 3 different doctors, and none of them really had the education or the time to give me to dig into what was happening in my body. I got 3 prescriptions for the pill was the recommendation, which I think most people experience in a similar boat. But I knew that something had changed inside of me because my cycles weren't always that way and they weren't that way every time. So something was going on in my body that was screaming at me for more attention. And I actually went externally to a functional medicine practitioner as well as a naturopath. And the naturopath was the first person in about 6 years that said, why don't we run some blood work? I couldn't get any tests. The doctors that I saw seemed to think that this was normal. I would grow out of it. This is just like so typical for teenage women. So that was really what changed the course of action for me when I had practitioners that leaned in and really looked at the situation with concern. So once I had some blood work done, we identified some vitamin deficiencies, as well as there was a nutrient absorption issue I was experiencing. And in the span of 3 months of making dietary and lifestyle changes, I got my life back, and I could not believe it, how quickly my body had adapted. So, yeah, that's what made me want to
Yeah,
scream it from
wow.
the rooftop. And yeah, 10 years later, that led to fertility coaching.
That is amazing that you were one able to advocate for yourself in that way. I feel like within like the health area, like, depending on the doctor and the relationship that you have, sometimes there is like a lack of understanding on what we experience when we're having menstrual cycles and the pain and the fluctuation. Like, a lot of things are kind of normalized, but when we speak up to say like, no, something is definitely not normal about the amount of pain that I'm feeling or how it's impacting your whole body, like it's good to advocate, and at the same time so frustrating when you kind of hear like these
Totally.
band-aid approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how many women I've talked to that have said to me, my doctor didn't believe me, or they thought I was seeking attention by booking all these appointments. And yeah, I'm a big fan that if your care provider is not providing care, it's time to get a new one.
Definitely. You also talked about your grade 6 health education. Honestly, ours was they like separated us. Boys went one way, girls went the other way. And honestly, all I remember was this is going to happen and this is a tampon, and they put it in water to show how it absorbs and kind of like expands. That was literally it. I'm like, and I went to a Catholic elementary school, and so I feel like any kind of like that sex ed conversation around what's happening to your body and why all of this is happening was definitely more minimal. But I am embarrassed to kind of admit that it wasn't until I was a young adult when I understood the menstrual cycle phases. And so, would you be able to kind of break down what these phases of the menstrual cycle are, just to kind of help us understand exactly what's happening to our bodies emotionally and physically?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, no need to be embarrassed. Nobody is given this education. And if you learned it, it was probably at home because you had a parent that was really aware of the changes your body was going through in puberty and was able to articulate that to you. I felt like I come from a very open household, but yeah, my mom didn't have that education either. So we were kind of learning together. And yeah, I've talked to lots of women, especially in the last couple of years in this role, people that are 3 times postpartum, they didn't know there's phases of their cycle. So this is education that is like very lacking for a very long time. So yeah, always great to learn it, and you can learn it at any time and it'll be beneficial. But to answer your question, there's 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, and this indicates 4 different hormonal shifts in the body. So what's really important about that is once you learn them, you can understand what's going on in your body better and be able to make lifestyle and dietary changes to really support those hormonal shifts, so they don't feel like they're running your life. So our cycles start on day 1. That's the first day of your menstrual bleed, and typical bleed lasts like three to 6 days, but it's different for everybody. On day 1 of menstruation, your hormones are at their lowest. So this is why people experience like low energy, feeling, more inward, needing more rest time, or it can feel really heavy emotionally. But it can also be a great time to really lean into rest and be a time of release and thinking about your body shedding what it doesn't need. So menstruation, a really important part because it's the first point in your cycle. So after that first part of your cycle, menstruation, we move into the second half of that first period, which is your follicular phase. So day 1 to 14 of your cycle is the follicular phase, but those first like 3 to 6 days are menstruation. And after your bleed ends, this is when estrogen is low, but it's starting to build towards the end of your menstrual cycle, begins to rise. And this is really when you'll see probably a more uplifting time in your cycle because serotonin and dopamine really connected with estrogen. The estrogen building supports dopamine and serotonin. You'll feel like you're in a better mood. You might feel like you have a bit more energy or you're more focused. By this point, your skin is probably clearing up. You're feeling less bloated. Like I said, your metabolism is a little bit steadier, so that energy has kind of come back to you. The midpoint of the cycle is around day 14, and I say around because not everybody ovulates on the same day every cycle or on day 14 every cycle. And this is the peak of your estrogen. So it's been building up in that first half of your cycle, menstruation, into the second half of the follicular phase. And when we hit ovulation, this is where it peaks. You're going to find you have your highest libido, you're very social. This is like the best time of the month to be a presenter or launch new ideas or be on a podcast or, yeah, kind of bring your creativity out into the world. So this is like really when you should be feeling your absolute best. But where people will run into trouble is once ovulation happens, there's a really steep drop off of their hormones. And that second half of the cycle, the luteal phase, is where people will experience PMS or PMDD. Folks with PMDD will experience really severe symptoms. And this happens because progesterone is rising. It's supposed to be calming to the body. But if there's too much estrogen that's not getting cleared out from the beginning of the cycle, that dip will actually drop serotonin levels, and that's when you're kind of you're feeling less like yourself, is I think the easiest way to put it. Some typical PMS symptoms are, of course, like bloating and breast tenderness and fatigue, irritability, and then extremes are like anxiety and depression, as your hormones are kind of fluctuating. And this all starts back over again on day 1 of your menstrual cycle. So average cycle is about 25 to 35 days. Most people fall in there. If it's a lot shorter than that or a lot longer, that's an indication that your body needs some support.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us because that I was like nodding because I'm in my luteal phase and I'm so tired. And I was like, oh, I'm not going as hard on my workouts. What's going on? And it was like, yeah, like you're fatigued, your body's kind of prepping for menstruation, like all of this is happening. But again, for people who aren't aware of these menstrual cycles, or like there is like a lack of understanding of what exactly is going on in your body and understanding the ups and downs that happen within our energy, with like our mood, how social we are in certain situations. And I think a lot of the time, like, like I mentioned in media, or, what's even discussed with men in your lives are those PMS symptoms, which is just kind of like the end bit right before your period, where it's like, oh, of course you're moody, or you're crying about everything. Like there's just like the stereotype of what a woman looks like when they're about to approach their menstrual cycle. And it's hard. But again, there's so much education that we can discuss just around those cycles. And yeah, like understanding what is happening in our bodies and those hormonal shifts. there's also an impact on like how that changes your appetite and cravings and all of that, and kind of your body maybe needing more nourishment at certain levels of your cycles. And so what would that, I guess, kind of look like? You talked about enjoying, nutrition, and how nutrition kind of helped you settle down some of that painful periods that you were having at some point. So what is the impact of food during these cycles?
Yeah, food is huge. Food has been really huge for me and how I manage my own period symptoms. I have a free download on my website that teaches you about the four phases of your cycle and what nutrients to prioritize in the four phases so that you can help yourself in supporting those shifts. Mostly, I see overall is that women are chronic undereaters. So there's already a lack of energy available in our body. And then that trickles down. When we're not eating enough, we don't have enough energy output, our hormones start to suffer, and then our periods get really, really unmanageable. So I'd say that the number one thing to prioritize is actually just eating enough. And when I say eating enough, I'm talking about not skipping breakfast, aiming for 100 grams of protein a day, making sure you're getting a variety of fibers and fats and proteins. More color on your plate, the better. The other thing that you can start to think about is how what your cravings are telling you. And I think we talk about this a lot with, like, if you're craving chocolate, that's probably a sign that you need more magnesium. But minerals overall play a huge, huge role in that energy availability and then also keeping you out of a depleted state. So I always tell people like a pinch of a Celtic salt or an unrefined sea salt in your water every day helps with remineralizing. If you are not a meat eater, really important to find vegetable sources of minerals as well. Like seaweed is so great. Um, yeah, and rebuilding your essentially your building blocks, keeping yourself out of that depleted state.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to link your website on our show notes so that we can all see kind of like those foods and the nutrients that are best for each of those cycles. I mean, you answered this question already a little bit, but why do some people feel more energetic and optimistic in one phase and then really fatigued or down in another? Like, what is the impact of that in terms of like our body and our hormones?
Yeah, so most people will feel like that energy surge around ovulation, and it's the second half of their cycle where things drop off, so to speak. So once the your estrogen kind of peaks, comes down, the correlation there is that you're kind of like downward shift. If you can think of it, your body's downshifting to prepare for your next menstrual cycle, as you mentioned. You can also see impacts in like a blood sugar shift, and there can be more inflammation during this time, or your metabolism slows down, so you're not digesting as easily. And all of this is going to create a bit of a backup. So a really important part of helping manage your premenstrual symptoms is, one, making sure that you're eating enough to clear out regularly. Bowel movements are a really important part of waste removal in the body, and that includes the hormones from the first part of your cycle. Because estrogen drops in that late luteal phase, you can also see a correlation with your idea of self, or how you're kind of moving through the world. People find they get really critical when their estrogen drops. They start to think that they're less capable, or they kind of like shy away from social interaction, or they feel more anxious in the world. And all of that can be indication that there's some mineral or some vitamin deficiencies going on as well. But it's also an indication that your hormones are just needing some support on a deeper level. So, yeah, food plays a big role in that for sure.
That's crazy though, that there's such a strong difference in terms of how we even show up for ourselves, or the way that we may be focusing, like being more self-critical towards ourselves just based on that, the hormones that are coming and existing in our body during that time in our cycle. And I think too, like a lot of like common mood changes that we hear about a lot is like irritability, sadness, brain fog sometimes is when that is described when we're, in a cycle. And so I guess, like, how can we normalize the range of emotions that we can experience? And at what point are some of those emotions maybe more concerning that we maybe need to look at a little bit more?
Yeah, the number one thing that I would suggest is start by tracking your cycle and tracking any changes in emotion or in mood that go with it. I think we're usually pretty good at like knowing what days we bleed on, and then we kind of forget about our cycle for the rest of the month. And that's really where a lot of change is taking place, even though we're not seeing it necessarily in symptoms that are easy to relate back to our cycle. So starting with one, any fluids that are coming between periods. So this could be cervical mucus, this could be discharge. This could also be bladder leakage. Sometimes people will experience that more at certain times of their cycle than others. And then also taking note of like, do you feel really good in the morning and then in the afternoon you're like not feeling so hot? Is your energy crashing? Are you like feeling really done with the world by 3 p.m.? That's probably an indication that there is some blood sugar wackiness happening, and your body is not able to sustain energy throughout the day. Maybe you skipped breakfast and it got a late start, or maybe there's just that lack of energy available as you go through your daily function. So I think if you can start by taking note of like what feels really normal. I've had clients say to me like, I feel great 3 weeks of the month, but then there's 1 week of the month where I hate my husband. Like I can't even look at him. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, we've reached a level of concern by that point. Or if you find that your cycle symptoms outside of bleed days even are interacting with your mental health in a way it's preventing you from like going to work or going to school or maintaining relationships, that's a level of concern for me that I would want you to dig into and seek support for sure.
Yeah, those are definitely things that we need to be aware of. I mean, I have an app on my phone which helps keep track of things, which is so much easier than like old school calendar that I used to do as a teen. But yeah, there's so many resources now at our disposal to kind of help us track some of those things. But I was laughing when you mentioned like just that 1 week I really hate my husband because that's honestly such a common thing that, between like girlfriends we might hear. And so yeah, it's good to know that that's something going on and that it's definitely something that we can fix within ourselves by nutrition or seeking out further support. You mentioned cervical mucus and then discharge. What is the difference? I thought that was like, an interchangeable word that you can use.
Yeah, so cervical mucus is a type of discharge. And we think of discharge as like this umbrella term for like anything that comes out of the vagina or the vaginal canal. Um, then we need to kind of specify because not all discharge is bad discharge. So cervical mucus happens because of that buildup of estrogen at the midpoint in your cycle. That's what will kind of be this, I don't know, upwards river, this like that houses sperm to carry it up towards the egg if you are trying to conceive. It's also great to know when that happens so you can avoid those days if you're not trying to get pregnant. So again, really helpful to tune into all of the symptoms of your cycle. And then if are you seeing discharge or different fluids outside of that ovulatory couple days of your cycle, and they're different colors, you got a bit of a funky smell going on, like those can be really prominent indicators of infection or a lack of balance in your internal flora. So important to take note of those because you don't want, of course, things to go into a full-blown infection, and your body's trying to send you some signals that help is needed internally. So that can be a really important indicator to take note of.
Yeah, like again, a lot of these stuff isn't taught to us in school. What would be one thing that you'd want to share with maybe a parent or a teen who is, just at the beginning stages of their menstruation?
Oh, that's a great question. I've actually spending a lot of time this summer thinking about like what type of education I would have wanted when I was getting my first period. And I think always the best thing to do is use the correct terminology, be able to explain why this is occurring, so that a young menstruator understands what's happening in their body and that it's not something to fear. About This is a little side story, but about 8 years ago, I did a little book where I collected people's first menstrual stories, and I had 50 women submit their first encounters with menstruation. And one of the main themes was that nobody knew it. existed. Nobody had talked to them about menstruation before it happened. So, one woman recounted like waking up in her own blood, of course, on the sheets and thought she was dying. And like, yeah, it's funny, but it's also, yeah, totally sad that that was the
Yeah.
experience and very devastating to a 12-year-old or 10-year-old or however old they were. So I would say talking to kids before it actually happens, and then also equally important to talk to your boys to make them understand what's going on, the women in their life, that this is, we live in cycle and this is really important to understand so that we can support each other better, within our family, but also like across the planet. I think that develops empathy to have understanding on that deeper level. And then the other thing I would do, and this is the fertility coach part of the speaking, is look for non-toxic options if you're able to, and really look at any of the products that are in your children's life already. If there's a lot of fragrance, if there's like a lot of additives, any kind of chemical exposure that we can reduce younger is going to help them cycle easier. We've seen so many studies now about the impacts of xenoestrogens or toxins that act like a hormone in the body. So limiting that exposure younger is going to have a larger impact on their fertility later in life. And fertility isn't just being able to conceive and have pregnancies. It's that's your life force.
Yeah, that's so important. And again, something that's not really discussed too much. I love that you mentioned educating boys as well. I have two boys at home and like they know what a period is. They know when mommy is having a period, when I maybe am a little bit more emotional, or when I'm like curled up on the couch because maybe I'm having some cramping. So they now understand that. But the way that that kind of education happened was really organically by asking why I was taking candy into the bathroom. Like, I'm like, nope, not candy. It's a tampon. What's a tampon, mommy? Okay. And so then I kind of had to go and like educate them on what this very normal thing is in a way that was appropriate for their age. So they're 6 and 9. And so, I communicated that to them, like my body is cleaning out the space, and it's cleaning it out by bleeding, and it's something that can sometimes impact my emotions, sometimes makes me a little bit more tired, or sometimes I get a little bit of pain. So really being able to explain it to the boys again is like not something that, like I told you in the beginning, right? At school, separated. Boys had their conversation about what's happening in their bodies, and women got their conversation about what was happening in theirs. And I want to be able to kind of create that knowledge for my boys, because there's going to be girls in their lives, especially for my oldest, going into grade 4. There may be some girls in his class who may be, starting their menstruation, and I want him to be a supportive person and not like, ew, what's that kind of attitude. And so that was like really priority for me. But I think it's so important so they can also be advocates and be able to support, should something happen to a young girl if they're not educated on it and it happens at school, like how can you support a friend of yours in the classroom without, being one of those people that may be making fun of them or acting all grossed out about what's happening to them in that moment. And so, yeah, I think definitely the education just all around, just for everybody to know, is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also for partners or spouses, like really great for them to learn your cycle and kind of keep track of it with you, because yeah, it's just so nice when your partner can show up for you, or maybe like already know why you're maybe being a little irrational today, or why you're crying at commercials, or whatever it is that kind of is the tip off. I just think there's a really lovely element of your partner being able to show up for you in that way, not only with compassion, but like hopefully with hot drinks as well. So
Yeah, what movie was it where they had like a period party? Everyone was on the same cycle, and was it Ashton Kutcher came in with like a period playlist and bought them all donuts?
oh my gosh, yes, they all work at a hospital.
Yes,
What movie is that?
no strings attached. No
Yes,
strings
yeah,
attached.
that was there's like two movies that year that had the
That
exact
were
same
very
plot.
similar plot
Yeah,
lines, yes. But that, again, very sweet to kind of have that understanding and be taken care of. So,
totally.
yeah. There is a cultural aspect too of like a girl getting their first period. We've heard about like, rituals or the welcoming into womanhood and what that could look like. Like, what are your thoughts on kind of some of those rituals happening now?
Yeah, I think my own first cycle is just so anticlimactic that I'm always surprised when, yeah, I've had like friends and clients tell me that, my mom had like a whole gift basket waiting for me in the cupboard upstairs that she was so excited to give me, and then other friends who like had, yeah, cultural practices around it where the whole family gathered to celebrate them, and they remember being like very embarrassed by that. And I think there's such a range, but I really appreciate that celebratory element of it because that really helps to combat the idea of menstruation being like dirty or wrong or broken, or we kind of live in this time where this generation right now that's online is like totally oversharing in a way that's bringing a lot of education. So there's something empowering about um, celebrating from a young age too. And I mean, I think it's okay to embarrass your kids a little bit every once in a while. And if the memory is like, mom was so excited for me, then you're doing it right, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Like, it is really sweet to kind of see at least a conversation happening and, like you said, it being celebrated instead of it being like, something embarrassing or something that you have to hide or can't talk about or should feel some shame about. And so I do love like those celebratory things, even though I agree a lot of kids report back to me like that was super embarrassing to have that experience. Mine was also very anticlimactic. It was just like, okay, well, here we go. And I like my mom gave me a big hug, and then it was like, okay, cool. This is a new thing I have to worry about now. But yeah, it can be kind of cool to look at it that way with, big celebratory moments that we can have. We talked about our menstrual cycle obviously impacting a lot of our emotions, but how do those emotions or having our menstrual cycle maybe interact with existing mental health conditions that people can have, like anxiety and depression? Just how do those interact with one another?
Yeah, I like to say that our cycles bring us more awareness and not always in the ways that we would choose or opt for on any given day. But really, like with mood, I find everything's amplified, if that makes sense. So if you're already having a bit of a tough week, or maybe you are someone that already has challenges with anxiety and depression, like not atypical that you would find that heightened during your menstrual cycle. And I think that's different from actual like mental health or menstrual disorders, but the typical menstruator, of course, might feel that as well. We can also find that it like really magnifies our own vulnerabilities about ourselves. So, in that week where you hate your husband, you might also like hate everything in your closet and not want to leave the house. Like those seem to go hand in hand for people that have shared with me. But in this time, I think if you can find some sort of practice, whether that's like breath work or journaling or just like going for a walk or like having a friend that you can tell all of this to, and they can say to you like, no, like it feels so real right now, and it is really real for you, but also you're the hottest person alive and I love you so much and you have so many great skills. Then sometimes it is best to kind of look away from the mirror and find a better sounding board. So yeah, I would say like approach yourself with care. Know that when you're tracking, this is really good because you can tell when it's temporary. I think that's a great reminder too. If you can like look at the last month and be like, oh yeah, 3 days before my cycle, I like did not feel my best self. This is really typical for me. And then lean into what can I be doing to avoid this in future cycles, and leaning into the like deeper care and nourishment that's needed to kind of move you out of that headspace being so just like really taking over for you.
Yeah, definitely having that awareness of and understanding of, oh, this is when I'm feeling the most anxious. And it does become a pattern and it can be cyclical where, it is like the last 3 days or whatever. It's just somewhere in there. It helps us have understanding and also helps us to kind of plan. So if we know that this is something that's going to be happening where we feel more anxious, then maybe we can plan around that in terms of like big things that we have happening in our lives or things like work events and things like that that maybe naturally already we have some anxiety around. We can be a little bit more mindful. We can also be a little bit more compassionate to understand like, oh, okay, this is the reason. I think I just saw a meme yesterday that was like when when you get your period the day after having like a big cry is so validating because you're like, oh, that's why that's why I was so sensitive about that situation. And so it can like having that awareness can be validating for us, but it also helps us understand, be compassionate with ourselves about what was happening and plan a little bit if it does end up becoming a pattern in our cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, great that you mentioned planning because I talk a lot about cycle syncing, which is this concept of like using your cycle to indicate kind of the like energy flow of your life so that you can make plans in
Hmm.
the weeks of your cycle that are going to be maybe like more fun for you to manage.
Yeah.
There's a coach that I worked with out of Germany and also named Olivia, and she taught me this idea of putting it in your calendar, like just having a block out of the week. So if you know approximately like when your menstrual cycle is going to start, I know it's going to start Tuesday. Okay, that majority week I'll block out and I'll put in menstruation and then kind of rotate through the 4 weeks so that now when I'm like planning ahead, I'll look at things and be like, oh, I don't want to. I don't want to take on, a speaking engagement, or I don't want to overbook myself in that week because I know that I'm going to need more rest leading up to menstruation. So
Mhm.
it can be a really great tool for tuning into when your energy will be more available to you.
Yeah, and that also goes too with like motivation, right? Like
Yes.
when we're feeling so fatigued, we might be like, "Oh, I'm being horrible. I don't I don't have any motivation to do anything." And we can be really hard on ourselves, but when we're able to kind of see how it lines up with our cycle, again, so much more understanding which leads to compassion. And I love that planning. I'm a huge planner. So I love kind of having that plan and even just again as you were speaking, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense that that 1 week I was super productive and now I'm like not anymore." So I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is lining up. To bring back Modern Family, I think in that episode we see like a lot of symptoms within the three women, right? So with Claire, the mom, we see sadness. With Haley, the eldest daughter, we see some anger, frustration, and sadness. And then with the youngest daughter, we see brain fog, where she's usually the very smart one and she's like pouring orange juice into her cereal. And she's like, what's wrong with me right now? And then also sadness, because I think that's just a general kind of stereotyped one of us experiencing sadness and just crying over commercials or whatever it could be. So it was kind of interesting to see how all of these different symptoms of being in our menstrual cycle kind of showed up with those three women in the episode. So I just kind of wanted to add that. But within that, like we talked about, right, stereotypes in terms of like what PMS looks like, these generalizations that can be made towards, women or anyone who has a menstrual cycle in terms of like their emotions, it's sometimes looked at in such a negative way. Um, and so it can be a myth too that, you know, everyone kind of has the exact same emotions when they're experiencing their menstrual cycle. So, what are some myths about menstruation and emotions that maybe you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, I'm sure there's more than we could possibly cover in the span of one answer to one question. I think the first one that comes to mind always is like, women are overly emotional or they're irrational. And the reality of that is like we go through incredibly large hormonal shifts on a regular basis. And that's not a weakness, that's biology, that's just be what happens when you're a cycling person. Um, and then the differentiator there is that it shouldn't run your life. Again, you might feel some heightened sensitivity, but if you feel irrationally angrily like all of the time, let's tap into that a little bit. I think, PMS being just in your head or some like made up thing. I've had that experience with doctors myself, like actual care providers totally dismissing that. So that's definitely a rampant narrative. And Hollywood and TV often plays into that, PMS is just like, yeah, so just like the secret that women have decided we're all going to just make up these symptoms and to make our own lives less manageable. But no, again, the reality of that is hormonal shifts, and there's a neurological component to that, as well as like metabolic changes. And there's just so much happening in your body on a regular basis. It's like no wonder that women joke they feel good like 1 week of the month. Um, I would say another one that comes up a lot is this idea of like, I experience a lot of pain or I have horrible periods. My body's broken. And I really want to clear up that symptoms are wisdom. And I hear that more often in the world of hormones and fertility as well. But yeah, this is your body's communication tool. And actually, there's a great practitioner, Lisa Hendrickson Jack, who has written a book called The Fifth Vital Sign about really your menstrual cycle being a monthly report card. Like you're getting great facts right from your cycle about what's going on in your body and how to support it. So I always like to say that our symptoms are like actually just trying to flag us down. Like, hey girl, need a little bit more over here. Can you take a look at what's going on under the surface? So in the same way that your car might be making weird noises and you go to a mechanic, yeah, don't ignore the symptoms that your body's given you as well.
Yeah, that's so important. I think too, it's interesting to see, and something I was thinking about while you were talking is not only the impact of the emotions that come with our menstrual cycle, but also how our emotions and our mental health can impact our menstrual cycle. And again, that goes with nutrition as well. If we undereat, that can then we can have an absence of our menstrual cycle. If we're overstressed, that can again create an absence of our menstrual cycle. And so there's all of these factors that play into that. And as you pointed out, it becomes a report card, even the lack of having a menstrual cycle on like a regular, quote unquote, regular basis, is letting us know something's off. We're either malnourished, we're not eating enough, or maybe we're experiencing something that we're maybe avoiding looking at or we're not aware of that is causing an absence of our cycle. So definitely listening to our body when it's trying to give us those signs, and be curious about it, advocate. And it's so frustrating that as women, we have to advocate so strongly within the health system. But unfortunately, that's where we're at with the health system at times. So, making sure that you are, being open and communicating and fighting for that support and knowing your body best and trying to give it what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of there's lots of steps or actions that you can take to support yourself um before before needing larger or medical intervention or larger support. I really when I'm working with clients one-on-one, I'm like, okay, here's what we can do together. Here's what's reasonable for you to change or to try and to see if this is shifting you in the right direction. And maybe you have some great shifts and you're like, my cycle's so much more manageable or it's more regular than it used to be. But I'm still having some difficulty in this one area. Great. Let's refer out. Let's find someone who can support you in that aspect rather than making you feel like you have to be on, like a year-long wait list to see a specialist. And then you see a specialist and they can't offer you anything other than a prescription or a surgery. And there's so much that you can be doing in that time to support yourself. So I'm a big advocate of seeking information for yourself, making some reasonable changes at home, and then looking for external support that's going to help you with what you already know about your body, help you solve what's kind of missing or that you haven't been able to dig through yourself.
Hmm. So we've talked a lot about PMS symptoms, and something that is, I guess, relatively a new term, I'm going to say, is PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So what is the difference between PMDD and PMS?
Great question. So PMS is premenstrual symptoms, and we've chatted quite a bit about that, but that's what you're feeling in those days leading up to your next cycle starting. As you said, PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder is like PMS tuned all the way up. It's hormonal changes that are your normal hormonal changes, but your brain has a sensitivity to them. So they feel much stronger and much deeper for people with PMDD. Again, not one of those things. It's not all in your head. This is real, a biological condition, and there are lots of people that have extreme PMS. Like I was one of those people. I had very extreme PMS. I did not have PMDD, which, as I said, is that the brain sensitivity to your hormonal shifts. So I would say that term is like more is used more than it has been before. I'm seeing more information. I think there's more research coming out about PMDD and why it's happening and how to manage it. But I would say the majority of people that are having those extreme symptoms, probably PMS. That being said, if you find like 2 weeks of the month you are not functioning, you can't get to work, you're angry with everybody, you have this like your mental health is like through the roof in this time, that could be an indication that you have that sensitivity, and PMDD might be something that you're struggling with. So worth seeking outside support whenever there's something that feels really extreme or it's taking over your life.
Some symptoms that I have heard from clients that either have a diagnosis of PMDD or are pretty sure themselves that they have PMDD are heightened anxiety and sometimes suicidal thoughts. And it is really challenging when we have that, because sometimes, again, depending on who we talk to about that, they might be like, it's all in your head. They're not as supportive in terms of, what that is, or it's looked at an exaggeration to an emotion that we may be feeling. So like you said, there's actually something in our bodies that is causing us to have these strong emotions. Usually, I mean, from what I've heard and kind of what you mentioned, is those 2 weeks right before your period is where some of those symptoms are elevated, and it has a huge impact on our lives, right? Like you mentioned, mental health through the roof. You might not be able to function as you once used to. Your anxiety is maybe more debilitating. You're maybe not leaving the house. You're noticing a lot of things kind of just completely impacting you during that time. And so that can be really hard. And advocate for yourself. If you start noticing those things, definitely go and seek that support. What are some, I guess, coping strategies or treatment options for folks who are experiencing some of that? Again, we're not diagnosing, we're just providing some of that support. If you want more information about that, definitely go to your family doctor. But I know I've had some clients come to me for therapy around PMDD and some of those symptoms, and just regulating some of those emotions for themselves without medication. And obviously, I'm assuming medication can also be something that can be part of a treatment option. But what are some other strategies?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it can be really hard to diagnose because the symptoms are so overlapping with anxiety, depression, and even bipolar disorder. There's there's just a lot that corresponds with the mood or the negative thought patterns element of those other mental health conditions. And it can be really hard for women to find care providers, like we've already said, that take them seriously, that aren't dismissing that, aren't just saying like just take an antidepressant medication or anti-anxiety. There's obviously some more support needed beyond that, and most doctors, like if you go to your family doctor, they don't have the time to dig into that with you, nor do they have the training on menstrual health conditions. And they probably don't have deep training on mental health conditions either. So it can be really hard when you don't know where to go for support. Another element of that, of course, is the like overall stigma around both mental health and menstrual disorders. So it's a bit of a rough combo to navigate. But I would say, as at this point, you're already tracking your cycle, you're taking note of it. What is it that what's the support that you need in this moment? So take it cycle by cycle. if this month you're feeling like your anxiety is what's kind of running the show, maybe it's time to book in with a counselor, a therapist, to maybe some validation would be helpful, and hopefully you have great providers that you can default to. But then another part of it is also the physical body too. So what can I be doing on a nutrition level to provide more vitamins and minerals to my body? Especially if you're someone that's already on medications or you're on birth control, all of those things naturally deplete us of the nutrients that we need to function. So where can you be extra nourishing at home? What kind of nourishment do you need for your mind? And then what kind of nourishment do you need for your body too? Body work can play a huge role in alleviating stress, but also helping move out stored trauma from the body. I'm referencing things like acupuncture and chiropractic and osteopathy. It could also be dance or movement and gentle movement at home. There's some great like guided meditations on YouTube or sound therapies or sound baths that you can listen to online. And then I would also say to approach it with kindness for yourself. You can't do everything all in one day, and as much as we like get into the state of non-functioning and panic and the anxiety begins to take over, really important to manage your stress and decide what's manageable for you to take on in this moment. So maybe you can't leave the house today, but maybe you can do some sound therapy or do some gentle stretching. Maybe you have the capacity to heat up a soup that's been in the freezer. Those smaller actions are going to accumulate over time and get you to a place that's more functionable. Functional, that's not a word. More better at function
We can
better
make it a
functioning.
word, functionable.
I'd
We
love
will
to be
make it a
more
word.
functionable today. My goodness.
But yeah, all of those resources and suggestions are so great. I've also heard, and this is like maybe a different thing, but I've also heard about like light stretching, yoga, certain exercises that can also help with cramping. So trying to see what works with your body, because everybody's body is going to be different. But definitely seeking that support. And even if you decided to take a therapy route and it's kind of like your introduction to therapy, when you're experiencing some of these symptoms and maybe think that PMDD may be something that you're experiencing, there are therapists who specialize in PMDD and PMS. And kind of like you with those fertility challenges and things like that, so you are able to find a therapist that is able to be your best fit depending on what you're coming in for. And if you have an existing therapist and you kind of want to stick with them, it's also about bringing those things to the surface, because although they may not be specializing in that area, they're still able to support by some of the things that you mentioned. So managing stress, how to be compassionate with ourselves, how to set up some coping strategies that may, be more personalized with our therapist in terms of the experiences that we are having with some of those symptoms. So definitely, practicing some of those things that you mentioned, and kindness, like compassion, just take it easy on yourself. This isn't anything that you're doing wrong. This is just your body and you're trying to understanding a little bit more. So just doing that with patience and with compassion.
For sure, for sure. And I would just add to that by saying, I know that can feel very overwhelming when you're in a place of debilitating pain. That was definitely my experience. I had to get strategies to deal with the pain before I was even able to touch the anxiety part of it. And I had to get to a place where I believed that my body could move out of these painful episodes, which was true. I was able to do that in a really short amount of time with those lifestyle adjustments. But it wasn't until I was in that more solid place with my physical body that I was able to tackle the menstrual side of things. So some of my favorite strategies for pain management are I love a topical muscle cream, applying that to the abdomen to help with cramps. If you're sort of like icy hot situation, there's lots of different ones out there, but that I find that brings a lot of relief to my abdominal area when I'm experiencing cramps, especially if I can't take my heating pack with me, but I do love an electric heating pad when I'm at home. Another thing that I started doing a couple of years ago was using like a massage or a Theragun style massage gun, and then just holding that to my belly button on a really low setting to bring some actual movement into the fascia and help my muscles to relax. My sister is a doula, so she uses a TENS machine a lot with clients. That's a pretty typical thing in labor to help your muscles relax. So I got a TENS machine, and I like to apply it to my back again to bring some relaxation into the physical muscles. That also sends signals to your body that it's okay to relax. And I think part of that, you can tap into with breath work as well. But usually when we're in a state of pain, that also is kind of driving the anxiety upwards. And if we can kind of trick our body into believing that, or not trick, but shift our body into believing that, we're safe, it's okay to calm down, often the pain will subside with that as well. And then there's lots of great herbs out there that make great teas. And I personally love homeopathics as well. I haven't been able to use over-the-counter pain medications for years because I used so many of them in the early days, and they just stopped being able to touch my pain. So I went the herbal route, and I've had really good success with that.
Yeah, and what you described too is being creative with the things that you need to do and not be afraid of trying new things. Um, but yeah, definitely like all the things you said. Pain, oh my gosh, pain has such a strong impact not only on our body but our mental health. Like, when we're dealing with that debilitating pain, our anxiety comes up, our bodies tense. And so I love that suggestion. I have one of those massage guns and I never thought to use it when I'm like cramping. So I'm definitely going to try that if my cramping
Great.
comes this month. But yeah, it's learning some of those things and relaxing our muscles and trying some other kind of resources and like homeopathic supports that we have for ourselves, and seeing again, like it might be trial and error at the beginning too when we're
For
kind
sure.
of just starting things out. So again, being patient with that process as well. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think we've talked already a little bit about like what practical steps we can take to understanding our cycles a little bit better. Like you said, like this generation is definitely a lot more open to talking about those things. There's so many things on TikTok and social media on like what our cycles are and how we're feeling in those cycles. Like there's a lot more discussion and conversations that are happening around like our cycles and what that looks like. So are there any other practical steps besides the ones that we've already shared so that we can better understand what's happening in our cycles?
Yeah, yeah. Just to summarize what we've touched on, we've talked about cycle tracking, we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about planning your life or like putting notes in your calendar about your different phases to help you optimize your own productivity and your own output. We've talked a bit about body work. We've also talked about movement. There's lots of information online about syncing your cycle with your workouts as well. So you're not trying to do those high intensity workouts in the first in the second half of your cycle when you're moving towards menstruation and needing more rest. But I think another really important thing we didn't touch on is stress management. Stress plays a massive role in impacting our hormones, but also creating inflammation in the body, which of course leads to more PMS symptoms. So whether that's getting gentle movement, going for a walk every day, or journaling, or getting more sun on your face. There's lots of great breathwork practices. Really try and find like what works for you and build a toolkit of pain management and of stress management and of self-care. It doesn't have to be going to lots of different practitioners, and lots of people can't afford to do that on a regular basis, and that's fine. There's great resources online, like I said, YouTube videos or guided meditation on Spotify or Apple Music. And then another really important part of managing the stress and mental health is connection. You need other people. We are community beings. So if you are struggling, please vocalize that to people in your life who can and be there for you and show up for you. And also don't be afraid to ask for what you need. If there's a point in your cycle where you can't get to the grocery store, or maybe your friend can bring dinner, and it's okay to lean on each other, and ask for what we need. That builds connection, and it also, I think, makes the world go round and makes it a nicer place. So lean into your relationships. Don't shy away from them when you're not feeling your best. And then just be reasonable about what you can do in a day to manage what you've got going on. Maybe you're a list person. I'm a list person. I like to make a list of what I'd like to happen today and
Me
then make a
too.
reasonable, you know, negotiation with myself. Okay, if I get 3 of these things done, I'll feel really good.
Yeah, yeah, I love a good list. But with what you mentioned too, it's, having that gentle curiosity of seeing like how we are actually feeling. Because as you pointed out, like stress can have a big impact on our menstrual cycle. So being curious to, like, if we're experiencing a new symptom, like, where is that coming from? How have I been feeling lately? And just, yeah, practicing that curiosity. You've, again, kind of already answered this in this last part, and this is like our last question, but how can loved ones or workplaces, which is like can be a whole other discussion, how can these areas and these people provide support when someone is menstruating?
Oh, this is like $1 million question. It's also what I've thought a lot about in the past decade, especially in terms of like employers or when I was in school, how do you talk to professors or teachers? We don't have great terminology in the English language that's like both respectful of privacy and like doesn't give too much information and also doesn't make it seem like you're faking sick. So I don't have a great answer for this question. Um, but I do think that honesty always helps normalize. So if you can get to a place where you're comfortable saying like, "Hey, I'm having cycle challenges," or like, "My cycle's really debilitating for me today. I need a personal day," or I need an extension or whatever the accommodation is that you need, that only further helps to normalize it and helps create, I think, more empathy and understanding that this is a major part of half of the population's life on a regular basis. And again, like you said, for chatting with your kids and making those conversations age appropriate, that only builds empathy over time. And um, yeah, there isn't like perfect language around it, but whatever kind of feels comfortable to you. And yeah, I think if you can be upfront, that's always helpful because I think people are more understanding when they know what's actually up with you, or they're concerned. They want to be able to help. So give people the benefit of a doubt. And if you're, in a position where you can't be honest or it feels too intimate to say that you're having menstrual issues, then it's okay to say that you just need some personal time too.
Yeah, and I think partners also educating themselves so that they're better able to support their partners who are menstruating is going to be really important as well. And so understanding the cycles, understanding the supports, or maybe even just like, what cravings does your partner have at certain times of their cycle, and just being able to be there for support can be so important as well. But yeah, is there any resources that that you really like, or that you like referring to people when it comes to maybe education on, our cycles, on our first periods? Like, is there any of that that you can share?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's lots of podcasts I love. One that really got this whole world going for me about a decade ago was Fertility Fridays. That's a Canadian podcast. Again, covers like all aspects related to menstruation and fertility. And Lisa is the host of that podcast, and she also wrote that book, The Fifth Vital Sign. There are some great resources on my own website. I have a blog, and on my Instagram, I'm probably easier to follow because I'm in video format there. So I like to keep it pretty light, and nothing's really embarrassing or off the table for me. So if you have questions, you can always DM me.
Where
And
where
then
can people find you? What's your handle?
I'm at the Menstral Coach on all platforms, and it's themenstralcoach.com as well as my website.
We'll put it in
And
the
then
show notes as well.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you. And then I do work with people one on one. So if you are having these challenges yourself, you're not sure how to navigate them, maybe you've had multiple doctors kind of dismiss you, or you're just not getting the care that you would like. I'm happy to help you navigate that and make changes for yourself and get a plan of action together. I offer a free 15-minute discovery call so we can chat more about if I'm a good fit as a care provider or coach for you. But outside of that, yeah, there's endless great people online. So it's a really uplifting time to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. It's spoken about so much more openly and honestly than it's been when I was a kid. So, yes, I appreciate people like you who are sharing some of that education through social media and those, socials that now that, a lot of people engage in. And so, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for sharing all of that information. Again, we're going to have all of your info in the show notes. So, make sure to check Olivia out on her website and on her social media. And as always, please make sure you follow us on Outside the Therapy Room Pod and stay tuned for next week. Our next topic is going to be on gender and sexuality. So don't miss that one. And thank you so much, Olivia, for your time here. This has been so much fun.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to chat periods.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.